Luo Yin, snow. Everyone says this snow's an auspice of a bumper harvest. What good will a bumper harvest do? Chang'an has many poor people. For them to be auspicious, it shouldn't snow much. So we continue with some poets and poems that did not make it to the 300 Tang Poets Anthology. And this is a poem by Luo Yin. So very briefly, Luo Yin is a late Tang writer. He lived from approximately 833 to 910, which means he witnessed the collapse of the dynasty. So typical background for scholar official. So he was a great poet, tried to take the examinations and was unsuccessful 10 times. Some say that is why he chose as his moniker, as his name, Jin, which means dormant in Chinese. So he failed the examinations. He was under the protection of a very important figure at court, the Grand Counselor Cheng Tian. But nevertheless, and probably because of these failures, and also because he was living at a time when the dynasty was collapsing and where the rebel Huang Chao was carving his way towards the north of China and the capital, which he would eventually take and sack. Probably because of these reasons, he retired to the eastern area of China, his original area, Zhejiang, which had been the territory of the old southern warring states of Wu and Yue. And when the Tang finally collapsed, he ended up under the protection of one of the local warlords, Qian Liu, the founder of the Wuyue kingdom, who offered him, gave him different official posts in his hometown. Anecdotally, Luo Yin was reputedly famous for his ugliness and his arrogance. In fact, some say that it was this very high self-appraisal, along with a biting wit, his mocking and sarcastic manner, which probably contributed in a non-trivial way to him not passing the examinations, which during the Tang, as opposed to the Song, was still a rather personal thing. Not only did you take the exams, but you took your writings to the examiners, and you mobilized acquaintances, and you had to establish good relationships to be able to succeed in the exam. It wasn't like just a pure meritocratic, anonymous type of exam. So Luo Jin, he is quite a prolific writer, prose and poetry. And the poem that we have chosen today was translated and included in his biography in the Biographical Dictionary of Tang Dynasty Literati by Edward Schaffer. So snow probably represents, it's a very short poem, as you have seen. It's a pentasyllabic quatrain, which is like the shortest metrical form you have in Chinese. Many of his poems show this biting wit, sarcasm, irony, for which Luo Jin was famous, and this is no exception. This is, clearly an undisguised attack on and mockery of customs and you could say public practice. So snow in China, in traditional China, is considered an auspicious omen. So we have to imagine ourselves, we're in the capital, Chang'an, late 9th century. Heavy snow is falling, and of course, the court astrologers and scholars, make proclamations about how this snowfall is, a wonderful thing, a lucky, a favorable, auspicious event that will probably that's probably divinizing that the harvest will be a good one. But Luo Jin makes this short poem, and he makes a very straight, down to earth message. Oh yeah, the snow might be an auspicious symbol, but for the poor people living in Chang'an, unable to buy and burn fuel for keeping warm, and many of whom might die because of the snow, for them it's definitely not an auspicious omen, and whatever the harvest may bring, many of them will die of the cold before the harvest time comes around in autumn. So I think that's the pure topic of the poem. It starts with the saying that everybody else is saying, and it mocks it. So it's mockery of you could say a superstition or an interpretation of this belief. In a way, it reminds me a lot like the very socially minded poetry of a lot of the mid-Tang poets, but even in the early, almost well, not in the early, but maybe in the High Tang period and in the Chinese tradition, definitely. Yeah, there's always this idea that the poet has to be, morally serious and engaged, and that is to be appreciated. Poetry as a venue for political criticism and for expression of political views, and very morally tinted ones. And well, this fits the mold completely, although probably a bit too direct and biting within that tradition. So let's briefly take a look at it. First couplet. Everyone says this snow's an auspice of a bumper harvest. What good will a bumper harvest do? So, no, as usual, the first couplet in any of these poems, also in a quatrain, it just sets the background, and here it sets the background and makes the question. So, background is there's a snow. This has been interpreted as the harvest will be good, but the poet immediately asks a rhetorical question: what good will this good harvest, if it comes to pass, be? What good will it produce? Which, if you just read until this, it feels a little bit self-contradictory. Not self-contradictory, but contradictory to expectations, because, a good harvest is what everybody desires in China and in this period, and obviously scholar officials as well, as it means that, the peasants will have lots to eat, there will be food. So why will the bumper harvest, if it comes, do no good? Well, the second couplet answers it and takes us back to the present. Chang'an has many poor people. For them to be auspicious, it shouldn't snow much. So, like the last time, feels like a punchline. It has an almost joking quality to it, even though the topic it is talking about is pretty grim. So, we're saying, in the imperial capital, lots of people, most of the people are poor, and snow, cold means harsh winter. It means you have to spend on fuel, which you might not have, to keep warm and survive the winter. So for them, it's better to have no snow, and even if it were a clear indicator that the harvest was going to be good, if they die from the cold, it will do them no good. So that's it, really. I don't think much more can be said about this poem. Luo Yin had, as I mentioned before, a reputation as a satirist and a writer, both in prose and in poetry, that could be very biting. And I think this poem probably represents that a little bit.